Because I was here, I was traveling, and today I'm not going to make it in 2 years. So I will be back on Monday. I was meant to record here.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Should I still be saying good morning, good evening? Really depends on where you are joining us. We are now back into the main room. From the tracks, I hope you all enjoyed those cutting edge, thought-provoking presentations that took place in the various tracks. We will now move on to the next item on our program, and that is the panel discussion under the theme, Managing a Higher Education Institution in a Struggling Environment. Don't forget to hashtag us, hashtag ICBMD, that's on Twitter, and of course on LinkedIn. You can follow our page with the CPU team, Faculty of Business and Management Sciences. And I'd like to now call on stage the following panel members. Well, our moderator will be Adjunct Professor J.J. Tabane, who will be, and the panel members will be Professor Paul Green. When I call your name, if you could kindly come up on stage. And we have Mr. Nathan Marimutu, whom I will just briefly introduce. He's a visionary founder of Empire Partner Foundation, a catalyst for positive change. With a passion for technology and social development, he has steered EPF towards creating impactful solutions. Nathan's innovative mindset and dedication have propelled EPF's mission, empowering youth, fostering skills, and championing entrepreneurship. His leadership inspires a generation to harness technology for transformative societal progress. I must mention as well that EPF is one of the proud sponsors of the Hybrid 9th International Conference on Business and Management Dynamics. And our last member of the panel is Dr. Kuhle Zwakala, an academic specializing in brand marketing at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. He is also strategic brand management consultant focusing on services in the township economy. He is also an opinion leader in the Cape Town's newspaper, a political commentator in major broadcasters such as SABC and Radio News Africa, as well as ENCA. And I will now hand over to Professor J.J. Tabane to give us a little bit of that power to truth energy.
No, thank you very much, Program Director. Gentlemen, there's no lady on the panel, eh? Prof. Dago, this is sexist, eh? All right. Well, this chair, I think, is meant for an additional lady. Maybe the Program Director must join. Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. Let me start with, because the topic is quite vast. But one of the key things that universities have to struggle with is access. So maybe let's start with that as access. And then, of course, the universities must run. So there's operations and development, etc. Sometimes they receive money from the higher education, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they receive money from business or even partnerships, sometimes they don't. So let's deal with just those two. And then if there's more time, we can add other elements, and you are welcome to bring in elements. Let me start with you, Prof.
Sure.
What are the challenges that universities face, right, when as far as access is concerned? Because, of course, there are more students. I'm sure your first year applications are 10 times more than what you can take in. How do you run a situation like that? How do you survive in a situation like that in an economy that's depressed? It's not like students who you have are actually from particularly rich backgrounds who will be able to pay their way, etc. Even when you have NSFAS paying for them, you still have problems with that.
So thank you, JJ. I think it's a critical question that you're asking, and it goes without saying that access is an important part of any institution of higher learning. and some of the challenges. But before I even get there, I think it's prudent to note that with the massification of education in South Africa, you're absolutely correct when you state that there is a large contingent of students who want to study at an institution of higher learning. And our university, as well as our faculty, is no exception to that, in that we have a considerable number of applicants for a very limited amount of spaces
space,
that are available. So when one speaks of access, you know, it is also enshrined in our constitution that education, right, it ought to be made available for all. But what we are finding is that with the limited number of spaces that we have available, we're just not in a position to take all the students. And as you've rightfully indicated as well, that even though you might get in students into the system, they will still have challenges around funding. And yes, a large proportion of our students are funded by the National Students Financial Aid Scheme, and we are grateful for that scheme. But by no means is that actually sufficient to cover all the students that are wanting to get into university. So yes, access.
So how do you survive? How do you bridge that gap?
So look, in terms of surviving, up until now, as we've been indicating, we are largely dependent on students that are receiving these bursaries, the funding from NSFAS. Institutions of higher learning are actually funded via three revenue sources. The first being tuition income, the second is that from subsidy income, and the third is in the area of the generation of third stream income. And that's why you'll find now with institutions of higher learning, there is a lot of emphasis that is placed on how does one actually bring in various interventions in terms of generating third stream income.
Just pass the mic. Do you think we should move away from tuition income? I mean, is that not in a sense an anathema to free education that has been promised by the state?
Yeah, so I don't think student fees should be the primary source of income for institutions, right? We're not, Prof, we're not necessarily in business, we're not in corporate, we're not in a profit-making sector, right? We must survive, we must be financially viable, but I don't think student tuition should be the primary source of income. So I attribute this issue of access to two things, primarily. It's the gap. Now, we need to look at access from this economic survival you are alluding to, firstly. Secondly, access or lack thereof can be directly attributed to the gap that exists between higher education and basic education. Now, remember, access is also influenced by, directly influenced by the output from basic education. Now, what matriculants are required to pass and university entrance, they're almost divergent. It's almost chalk and cheese. That causes lack of access as well. So many students may be wealthy from their homes, but if they don't perform academically, they will never gain access to institutions. And I think you've thoroughly alluded to the issue of economic survival, right? There's been there are currently business opportunities in universities. Reses, JJ, from when you were at Res, when I was at Res, we paid minute amounts comparative to what these private accommodations are charging nowadays. So it's become a business opportunity. Now, that is a barrier to access to education as well, because if you move from Limpopo or Ngamakwe, whatever the case is, you need to live somewhere. You don't have the money.
And those the implications exactly of the depressed economy, that there are people now who are trying to make a quick buck out of the misery of students.
But directly, fully agree. I fully
How
agree
do you
with
avoid that unless you build more residences?
Second,
And the business community is not interested to invest because nobody's going to pay back that money for them once they build those residences.
I suppose, Prof, I mean, the second, third, fourth income stream, if it must be, but students must gain access to higher education.
Okay. What's business attitude towards it? I mean, are there more businesses who are investing in the future by creating more bursaries, etc.? Why are we still talking about the missing middle in the midst of probably a business that must invest in future skills?
No, thanks, JJ. I think it's a very hot topic, excess. But maybe I would look at the inverse of it. What was the output? So we have to ask ourselves, why does somebody want to study? It's a huge commitment from the family first, let alone the institution. And most of our students are not financially viable from homes. So it's the cost commitment from a home to send a student to university is very unrecognized. We don't calculate that cost. So parents, the householders make many, many more sacrifices. But when we look at the output of our annual students, where do they go to? So we have this myopic dream that if I go to university and get a degree,
then it will solve all my problems.
it will solve the family problems, especially depending upon the economic background you're coming from. And then suddenly, when you have students that are now qualified, they don't know where to go. I want to give you an example.
Talking about jobs.
Well, where do you use this knowledge?
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to learn something in science, I have to apply it. If I'm going to learn something in engineering, I have to apply it. So I arrive at this dead end, and now every year we produce a couple 100,000 graduates who are final graduates who end up in no market. So the question is that how much of technology are we using to maybe broaden access, which will ease the burden? What drives the price of a university tuition? It's something that amazed me because I saw University of Cape Town as an example, and don't hold it against me, had built something called Get Smarter. It was a digital opportunity. And I see it escalated. They got a valuation of 1.4 billion for this thing it was sold. They had no assets. It was just a platform, but reached out to a wider audience. And at our offices and our...
As a teaching aid, a study
No,
aid.
you could study through it. Get Smarter meant you...
Completely, without being at university, at school, in class.
Completely. You have a digital tutor, digital lecturer. And
does it make tuition cheaper?
Far cheaper.
They're saying you can choose that instead of coming to class.
Well, the university piloted it on those who could not go for a full degree, wanted to have a short course.
I see.
And they piloted it. And now I see this year they're reading the matrics. So some staff of ours said to us, no, they moved their children into UCT's matric program.
Yes.
So I was a bit concerned because we were paying for it. And it's like 1/10 the price of Cairo. They're very happy with the service. So the question I was going to say to you is that there's the issue of how much technology are we using to access those students. And COVID taught us a lot. But what drives the price of a university education? There's administration costs. There's stuff that's already embedded by the state. So there's no innovation that's coming from Treasury, the Department of Basic Education, or the university. It's become an administrative center, in my view. So you are just bound by those rules. We haven't seen any new other innovation come out of campuses. I'll give you an example, just two examples. I won't mention the bank. I approached the bank late last year, one of the leading 5 banks, and I said, okay, why can't you contribute 100 million rand to a university and pre-fund students that you will employ?
Yes.
And so the executives flew down to our office in Cape Town because this is where the discussion was taking place, and they said, okay, show us the model. I said, no, at some point in 5 years' time, you're going to require these resources. They said, yes. So why can't you use your money as a tax benefit, invest in these students today, and you guarantee them that if they pass, you'll take them up as your resource. And I must say the program worked. So I said, why can't you do 1 billion? I said, because you write it off against tax. You are pre-financing your future workers and knowledge workers. Now, that was just us intervening in something. The university in question responded well, and now we've encouraged them to split that money with all the universities. Their challenge was, okay, how much can we absorb? Now, a good example is IT developers, where all the banks are employing like 30 or 40,000 foreign developers on our soil. And our people are capable of doing that. CPU2 being one of the UOTs. Of the 26 universities, there are 6 UOTs, which are universities of technologies, which technically should be producing all the future tech resources for the country.
Yeah.
And these universities don't realize that we're being competed on a global level. So you could find a developer in Nigeria from here, or Thailand, or America. So where's our innovation coming from the campus? So 3 things have to be answered, JJ. One, nobody's had the debate of saying what drives the price of education. We've taken it for granted. That's the fee we've set. It covers the administration. There was no innovation on it. Second, can somebody learn 70% offline and 30% online? Or can I do 100% virtual and provide the assistance? And thirdly, how do I put a corporate bond together to future-proof society?
All right. I think that gives us a nice frame for discussion. Can you latch on to that and say whether are there still gaps between what the institutions teach and what the industry requires? And that will link to the last point about what would then incentivize companies to invest, because if companies think that you are teaching stuff that's irrelevant, they're not going to put their money there, because when those people graduate, they won't be useful for them.
Well, look, absolutely, and that's why we have on our national news reports, right, that so many graduates from universities that are unemployed. So one actually has to ask the question as to whether the type of skill set that we are producing is meeting the demand that is required out there in industry. Hence, that's why you'll find at universities of technology, we have a particular course, which we refer to as work-integrated learning. By that, it is a very close alignment between the university as well as industry. But to come to the point, I think it's absolutely important that there must be this continuous engagement between industry and the university. And
you're
looking
talking about it as a future tense. Are you saying there isn't such
no, there is absolutely
engagement at the moment?
Absolutely, there is. But I think what we also not also bringing to the table in the discussion right here is that all of this needs to operate in a thriving economy. And now, once you have an economy itself that is suppressed and depressed, then you'll find businesses themselves are also just trying to keep afloat, to survive. And as a consequence of that, you'll find very little engagement that is taking place because they're just keeping their heads out of water, right? Or above water. But coming to the point is that you'll find that there will always be some need for tuition costs. Because at the end of the day, a university needs to cover its expenses, like all organizations. You know, there's lights, there's water, there's admin costs, and the likes. So there is genuinely a need to cover those costs.
But is the issue is the tuition fee, should that be the primary source of the income for universities? Should universities put their heads together to say, how do we fund that pool of students who actually can afford it, and not leave that to government?
Well, absolutely, and that's the reason why you're finding that there's greater emphasis these days in the discussions around entrepreneurial universities, in the discussion around contract research, and how does the university really partner with business in terms of generating this new knowledge in exchange for income into the universities. But having said that, JJ, there's no institution that is currently amongst the 26 that can actually operate without that type of subsidy income and tuition income. That's where we currently are.
What percent of the revenue of a university is attributed to tuition at the moment?
At the moment, it'll vary from institution to institution,
Roughly,
but you'll find
on average,
you'll find in excess of 60 to 70%
that's
of the
too
income.
much, isn't it?
But that's where we currently are.
People who actually don't have the money, and in a depressed economy, what would be the solution? I mean, you are strong in saying tuition should not be the primary source. Then what should be the primary source?
Before I get to that, JJ, the apparent gap between university output
Yeah.
and industry requirements.
Yeah.
I think we need to, earlier when you were saying we inward focused,
Yes.
I think it's a pertinent point that we need to address because it directly affects what you're asking me. So now we need to look at why are students studying? From a student perspective, they're studying to be employed,
Yeah.
right? What are we teaching them? How are we teaching them? But I quickly want to move to the whole postgrad offering.
Yeah.
Now we somewhat saying PhDs are redundant.
Yeah.
What does one require? What's the primary goal? Is this thing that you're referring to? You must produce new knowledge.
Yeah.
Secondary, if it's good enough, your findings are applicable in industry. We need to relook at that to say, why are we producing these papers? What's the usefulness?
Yeah.
But then that requirement remains that you must produce new knowledge.
Yeah.
In Germany, I think it was
So they shouldn't be studying to be employed. They should study to employ. They should study to innovate. They should study to start their own business and so on, isn't it?
Shortly said, they should study to address industry challenges. It could be their own entrepreneurial challenges.
Yeah.
It could be corporate challenges.
Yeah.
Do away with this thing, new knowledge, new framework, for what,
Yeah.
for who? That's the first thing. Secondly, saying how should then the institutions be funded? I think we need to hold the private sector accountable. We need to hold the private companies accountable. We need to obligate them, not only to donate for goodwill as and when they wish. Okay, it needs to be a policy, it needs to be law that corporates, the profitable capitalists that are running this country, are not investing enough funds in higher education.
Yeah.
And strange enough, they're not employing enough young people. The quite a weird phenomenon is that certain students, they study further because of unemployment. You finish a fourth-year degree, no one will absorb you. So
Yeah.
therefore, to avoid sitting at home,
You study some more.
you study some more up
Yeah.
until you get to the PhD level that is seen to be
you are then
redundant.
overqualified. I don't think the PhD is redundant. I think that's an extreme version of
Yeah.
discussion. So it's not redundant. It's just not being used for the purposes for which actually it is being designed. Because remember, to actually pass, if there's such a thing, to pass a PhD, it has to answer the question whether or not it's of any use. That's a funny part, that actually you shouldn't find a PhD that when you read it, it's of no use. Because then how did the person pass?
Yeah.
Because how did they go through even the first stage of, this is my proposal, this is what I want to do? Because also they must go and find out whether anybody else has done the thing that will deal with your redundance. Because if redundant means somebody else has already done it, right? But actually to pass, you need to come with literature review that says nobody has done this, therefore there's this gap in the market.
Last thing, JJ, I hold a PhD, so I can't be the same one that gashes it, but but you must look at the reality, JJ. So the goalposts keep on shifting
Yeah.
for PhDs.
Okay.
10 years ago, you were told, black child, go get a PhD.
Yeah.
Okay? The doors of heaven will open for you.
Yeah.
Okay, you get to the PhD,
And you
the
realize
goalpost
no
shift.
door is opening.
So I'm saying redundance, not in the sense
and you must
that,
do a postdoc,
Yeah.
because it means that you need to add something to your PhD. Okay.
Let me just add my 2 cents worth. There are 3,200 postdoc researchers in South Africa across the 26 universities.
Sure.
And let me ask you a question. What do you think is their contribution to society to solve the problems you are raising? Not forget corporate South Africa. Because corporate South Africa has not changed in the last 150 years. It's amorphous. It changes in shape and size
Yeah.
based on market movements. What creates new industries? So when you look at South Africa's history, I don't want to sound a very old man, I'm already an old man, but if you take from 1845 is when Old Mutual was formed. I can put money that most of you all don't know how Old Mutual was formed. I'm willing to wager 10,000 rand, you know. That's a capitalist. Very few can tell me a PhD, no PhD, why Old Mutual was formed. So I'll tell you a 2-minute story. It was formed by a Scotsman who went to English people and said, why are you sending money to London to insure your lives, as they were the administrators here? So they formed the Cape Aid All Mutual Society. This was the first English response to capitalism. That's what I understand it to be in the history books.
Yeah.
And what gave rise to them to pool the capital. When I was walking up here this morning, I was saying to JJ, I see a sign there of how this club was formed. 300 shares at £1 each in 1927, and they issued a debenture of £10 each amongst members, which means they raised £3,000 to build the place. Which means it was a voluntary congregation of people who had an ideology of saying, let's pool something to build something.
Yeah.
So the question that we're speaking about, innovation, what does innovation mean? It means we must be able to innovate things and get it done. But we can't expect an industry to appear from the sky. It's like the second coming, We're just assuming these things will come. Who creates industries? Society is made up of 4 key pillars. First is academia, from basic education all the way to continuous learning. Second is government, which is fundamental because it's the tax collector. Third is the business community, which is not necessarily only a large corporate. It could be a fed cook seller. Anyone that's involved in some form of commerce or arbitrary commerce. And fourthly is civil society. These 4 components, when they don't talk to each other, is where we have here. So I gave you the example of All Mutual. In 1917, when the Afrikaner was at its lowest ever, Santam was formed, not Sanlam, because they had to find a measure to protect the farmers on an insurable measure. An Englishman now goes to Afrikaners and says, hey, let me show you how to put an insurance company. And the following year, they created Sanlam. So there was a response again. So all these interventions I'm referring to, somewhere in society, there was a response to it. The dynamic we find ourselves in South Africa today, as a moving society, dynamic society, we have not formulated a response in 30 years. We've lacked a macroeconomic strategy, from gear to all sorts of new ideologies.
Yeah.
So we are in this ship with no direction. A rainbow ship, all the lights are sometimes burning, not burning lately. Now we are load shedding the lights. But we don't have a direction. And so that's what happens in a society when you call it dysfunctional. But is it intentional? No. Just to tell you a story, in 1995 I get appointed as the chairperson for SAGDA. I'm not sure if you guys know what SAGDA is. It stands for South African Graduates Development Association. And I was asked by somebody very senior in the country to assist them. I just come back to South Africa. There were 20,000 double graduates who belonged to SAGDA, who never had a job.
Yeah.
And majority had come from Wits University. So I went to Wits to meet the VC. And in a public debate, I asked the question, what car do you drive? She drove a Toyota. I said, do you think it's good? She said, no, it's very good. I said, when you have a problem, what do you do? He said, I'll take it back to the dealership.
Yeah.
I said, why? He said, no, for warranty. And I said, okay. So you buy the car on the premise that if something goes wrong, I go back to the dealership.
Yeah.
I said, I've got 20,000 cars. They are called students. And
So you take them back to
and they took them back and taught them how to go for an interview or a program. It's how the premiership program started. The Gauteng Premier started taking graduates, came from that. So all I'm asking of is that when you speak about business cannot work in isolation. University can't work in isolation.
Yeah.
I can't invoice myself. I'll be a genius, I have to invoice somebody. So the question to ask ourselves that what will solve this problem is not rhetoric. It's a functional innovation that says, okay, we have so many problems in South Africa. Amazingly, the net reserve of our equity knowledge are the universities. I think to echo the point you were saying this morning, who is troubling themselves to say, how will I solve the transportation problem of Western Cape? This is what gives rise to industries, Dean. So that's what, if you look at all around the world, what gave rise to new industries was this thought leadership, was young minds, fresh minds. This is what I'm referring to. I've already tried an experiment. I think some people are aware of it at my office in Johannesburg. I took about 100 students from TUT, postgraduates, finished the degrees, and some on the WIL. The challenge with the university technology is that their knowledge of the industry was 5%.
Sure.
Because by the time they finish campus, technology has accelerated so fast.
Yeah.
So it takes us 90 days to get them back online. But we put them in a live environment. Now the kids have learned never to forget it. But when I approached TUT, it wasn't a bad thing. They said, Nathan, we don't have the capacity to match. I said, no, guys. You can't be teaching me about something that will be outdated by the time I finish.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, what drives excess is only demand. When there's a demand for the economy and it grows, more of us will study.
Yeah.
But today we are studying because of hope. So the functional relationship with the two is that excess equals demand and demand will create excess. But hope is no person's paradise, which is where you are today.
All right. It's interesting. Can you just deal with this thing about the gap? I want to go back now to the gap between industry and what is being taught. Is there a problem of some of the people who are imparting their knowledge at our universities themselves being out of touch or with what industry is busy with? You find that a person has never been on a factory floor, they are teaching engineering, but they've never been on a factory floor for the last 20 years. Yeah. So what are they teaching their kids?
Yeah, but I think we must also
other than
accept,
theory they can always teach themselves.
So I think we must also accept that you get different types of universities in the country.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get the traditional university, you get universities of technology, and I think the question that you are raising actually speaks to the University of Technology, which is very often vocational driven. Okay?
Yeah.
So in as much as the product that we are putting out ought to meet the needs of students, I think they must
the needs of industry.
Needs of industry.
Yeah.
I think there must be that continuous engagement with industry. Hence, you'll find, as I spoke about earlier on, this work-integrated learning.
Yeah.
So where students go out into industry, you'll also find that academic
Shouldn't the
stuff.
entire curriculum be work-integrated?
Well, you find that in terms of the mode of delivery and the method of work-integrated learning, you'll find that it makes allowances for what you are just mentioning right now. But coming back to the point, right, you'll find that do you actually find academic staff actually going out into industry and working in industry?
No.
You don't find that.
Yeah.
You don't find that.
That's
So-
not the problem.
Exactly. But then how do we actually bridge that gap? Or what are the interventions that we put in place to bridge the gap?
Yeah.
Hence, you'll find the critical role of research in that particular area.
Yeah.
And that's why we're saying that the research must be practical research. Research must address the needs and the challenges that we find
Universities hire
inside.
more people who are actually in industry, right, in order for you to bridge that gap.
But then you also need the theoretical knowledge, and those are found amongst the academics. So should we put it differently and say,
That's fine. You can combine the
let's combine the
workforce,
skills, and that's why you'll
not to be
find
too theoretical.
absolutely, and
And
that's
then
why you'll
leave the
find.
students to be without jobs after that.
And that's why you'll find, to answer your question, in various supervisory models, right? You will find an expert from industry that will co-supervise with somebody that is an expert within industry.
Okay,
So you
that's
find
already-
the
that's
expert
already
from the
happening.
university,
Yeah.
yes, that will pull in an expert from industry. You'll find that quite often.
Yeah.
I want to give you a live example. You see, when a non-academic joins academics, at Wits University, I attended something a few years ago called MIST. It was the Mathematical Industrial Study Task Team. And it was a bunch of young kids, were physics and maths.
Yeah.
And MIST was set up where it worked with industry. And they have a 100% success rate.
Yeah.
In fact, they can't meet the demand. So what they did is that these kids went out to large organizations, mining companies, worked out a lot of processing challenges. So every day they were looking for problems. And so they went through the African continent. And when you go to MIST today, all those kids are superstars.
Yeah.
And if you ask what drove that, I think there was just some mixture of industry and the university saying, hey, we're going to start solving problems. Yeah. You take the city of Johannesburg, city of Cape Town are failing metros, and parallel to that, you look at the institutions of learning. There's a paradox here because, we are like in two different worlds. So that we should be, when I'm learning something, I should have this hunger that I want to apply it and I want to solve it. And I do agree with you. It's not easy for the industry to come because industry don't trust institutions.
Yeah.
The
Let's go back to that. You
Sorry.
talked earlier about holding industry accountable. And you even said they must be legislated in terms of these things that they are talking about now, because now it looks like they can do it or they may choose not to do it. But actually, there's already a law that, first of all, says that they must spend 3% of their revenue on skills development. It's already in the law, right? They must spend money on enterprise development. It's within the BE Act that they must do that,
Yeah.
right? And then they must spend 1% of their profit after tax on corporate social investment. It's just that all of that stuff is not coordinated. Any company can choose to do it as they please. Don't you think that that could be enhanced? So you don't need a new law. You just need a political will by business to do what's already in the law.
Yeah. So, JJ, you scrap the third one, the CSI one, right?
Or scrap it.
You scrap the CSI
Why
one.
you scrap that?
Rechannel that to education, because the reason you need to engage in CSI projects is because of people are hungry, they're unemployed, right?
No, but within the CSI, you can also have education.
Yeah. So
You give bursaries or whatever.
yeah. So 3%.
Yeah.
Because now what these corporates tend to do,
Yeah.
for CSI projects, they go and make a soup kitchen. They take a lot of pictures. Okay, that won't address our issues in society.
Yeah.
I'm saying rechannel the money directly into education, right? The 3% comparative to profits that they make,
Yeah.
and the exploitation that takes place. JJ, I say this disclaimer. I've been in private sector.
Yeah.
Okay, I've been financial services, logistics, so on and so forth. Now, comparative to the profits they make,
It's a drop in the ocean.
it's a molecule.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're saying something, I know it exists, but at 3%, it's all somewhat meaningless. Okay, so I'm saying if you refocus this on in education,
Yeah.
we're a very critical stakeholder in society. In fact, I may suspect that I can allege that in the midst of everything that's going on in society now, I think universities hold the solutions to our problems. Okay, but then
They just don't know what to do.
well,
They've got the ingredients, but are not cooking the proper meal.
I don't agree. I don't agree. And I'm saying, JJ,
Yeah.
we just need to build a more co-creative society between universities and industries.
Yes.
There's currently a fierce contestation between your executives in the corporates and what we produce. We produce proper staff in universities, JJ.
Yeah.
For private companies, for government.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the current environment is not conducive or is intolerant
Yeah.
of what universities are telling societies, especially what universities are telling a government in particular.
Yeah.
So
They don't seem to be telling them much these days.
but they don't seem to be given the space to be telling them. So I'm
What
saying,
space do you need right at the moment? Let's talk about the current situation now, and a number of critical, if you like, policy interventions. Let's take macroeconomic policy.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
What is stopping universities from coming up with that
But then-
macroeconomic
but then they-
policy and giving it to government? Your president just went now to go and talk about the SDGs.
So-
He sounded like he doesn't know what he was talking about.
But
But
this is-
you've got academics who have studied those things.
No, but then you can't subject the
Yeah.
academics works to only policy formulation, right? Put
Yeah.
academics in charge of certain sectors of government in particular. So when we say you can't have,
Yeah.
I won't mention names, you can't have certain leaders that don't have certain qualifications. We
Yeah.
deliberate about that because part of this, you'll know, you're an academic yourself,
Yeah.
part of this academic agenda is that you just become a value to society in the various sectors of society.
Yeah.
You with me? So don't subject the work of academics only to policy formulation. Put academics in charge, right? E.g., we've got a minister of education
Yeah.
who's an academic, right? I'm not
Is she
rating.
an academic?
It's a he.
No, higher.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
basic.
Sorry, no higher education. No, no,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I mean higher education. Did I say
Yeah.
basic?
Yeah.
No. So you've got a
Yeah,
minister
yeah.
who is an academic himself.
Yeah.
I think he knows what he's doing, right? Because he's been through the process. So if you're talking about engineers,
Yeah.
right? At CBT, we've got one of the probably the most competitive engineering department. Put a person that I think we once produced a dean that was CEO at AXA.
Yeah.
You know, an engineering. So don't limit us. Okay, be accommodative to what we do as academics. We may just be a bit more open-minded and not inwardly driven, as you were suggesting.
No, wonderful. No, that's truly interesting. Yes.
If I may just come in here, I
Yes,
think
Prof.
it goes without saying, right, that universities have a significant role to play in the country.
Yeah.
And the solutions to societal problems reside in university.
Yeah.
I think the challenge that we are having is how do we bridge this gap in terms of implementation?
So to translate those
The
research
knowledge, the
outcomes,
skills,
et cetera,
exactly.
into practical implementation.
Absolutely.
By
And-
government.
Absolutely.
That is sitting with the resources to
Absolutely.
implement.
And so these types of discussions, right, I believe
Yeah.
are critical that need to be escalated to higher
Yeah,
platforms.
but nothing stops academics from applying for those jobs, is it?
well,
You can apply for those jobs on all those
You can-
parastatals.
yes, you can apply for those jobs, but is that going to be the solution? Is that
Yeah.
what we're wanting in the country? Whereas, should we not have this further engagement between the universities, government, as well as industry, to identify these societal challenges
Yeah.
and see how best can we leverage from the skill sets?
Right, so
from
nothing
the-
is stopping you as universities now to convene that conversation.
Well, absolutely
Because
not.
when we come out of here, we can't say we just talked for 3 days. Or
but the
whatever.
same token,
Can't
but the
you
sa-
convene that conversation? Because when you're talking about it as future tense, it means it's not happening enough.
Yeah, but JJ, one will ask the question, then why is there a need to convince? We shouldn't have to convince. We must
at the
firstly
moment,
accept.
it looks like you have to convince.
Yeah, but then we must accept in the country, we
Yeah.
must accept that we've got societal challenges,
Yeah.
and the way to address that
Yeah.
is by leveraging all these various
Yeah,
industries
so what are you
and
gonna
universities.
do about that?
So I think,
That's my question. What are you
well,
going to
I think the policymakers really
Yeah.
need to take note of this and see how we can have these
They'll
types
take
of
note for
discussions.
years. We'll be here in your 10th conference, and nothing would have happened. That's my problem. Well, what can we do practically, right, to cause something to happen so that this discussion doesn't become a talk shop? Now, that's the parting shot I want from all of you.
Well, I think at the end
You
of the
can
day,
start.
right? That I think we must be seen to be addressing societal needs. We must be doing that.
Yeah.
If we are not doing that, then I don't believe that the university
It's useful at all,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. More so. One spoke earlier on about having a PhD, and that PhD is just found in a particular hard copy and it's found in a library. I think it's really not addressing any particular need,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If one takes cognizance of the presentations earlier this morning, it is the fact that, at the end of the day, we must be addressing the human need, the fact that people are hungry, the fact that people are unemployed.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, if we are just thinking that we are just producing a particular a graduate
Yeah.
that's for a particular vocation,
Yeah.
then I think that we are being very myopic in terms of what is the purpose of education,
Absolutely.
because it is more than that.
Thank you so much. There's a full paper which I'll recommend that talks about the African PhD.
Yeah.
Right? It can't be the same as a European PhD. Maybe a European PhD, people can have a PhD for the sake of it or of a title. But here we need to be able to start asking the hard questions. What are you going to do with that knowledge? With that knowledge that you have gained, that research, and not just on the PhD, even the research papers, master's research papers. I mean, you saw there was a master's paper that was converted into a PhD. So it's the same difference, right? Well, you are researching something and then you put it in a library, right? Unfortunately, in Africa, we should be saying the development needs are such that we can't afford that anymore.
Where to from here,
Yeah.
JG,
Where
is a question. I think what you touched on earlier on thought leadership, that is the essence of the problem that we're sitting with. And I'm going to say this very cautiously. We need to depoliticize governance responsibilities and structures. When I'm saying depoliticize, I'm not saying do away with your main politics, as it were,
Yeah.
but be a bit more accommodative, a bit more agile, a bit more collaborative. Include some of the leaders that may not necessarily be in your mainstream politics,
Yeah.
in the leadership of this country, right?
Yeah.
When you limit this to your mainstream politics, as it were,
Yeah.
you are limiting the space. So give academia the space to lead. The current status, and it has not changed for the past 30 years,
Yeah.
you lead, if you shout slogans of parties the loudest, therefore you are clear,
Yeah.
you are a leader. That does not solve our problems, right? So there are various individuals in society.
Yeah. But tell me, what's stopping academics from leading?
the-
You've got 26 universities.
the environment
with
is not
multiple
conducive.
leaders in there.
The-
In which way?
The environment is not conducive.
Yeah.
You were saying earlier on,
Yeah.
apply for
jobs,
apply for
the job. Yeah.
you will not get it. You will not get it. They will say requirement NQF level 7, 5 years experience. You are sitting on 15 years, you are NQF level 10.
Yeah.
You'll never get it. That's right. It's because of
Yeah,
political
it means you're
deployment.
overqualified.
I mean, that can't be, you know. So I'm saying to you, those are political deployments. I'm saying to you, depoliticize certain sections of governance. I'm not against politics. They must be there. They play a very important role in our society. But depoliticize it. Be a bit more co-creative and a bit more collaborative and inclusive, of course.
All right. No, thank you. Your parting shot?
Yeah, maybe an easier way to look at something is always the positive, you know. So let's look at these youth students we're referring to and those who are they an asset? So in Africa, we're about 1.4 billion people. And our average age in Africa is 18.8. And 65% of the population is below 25.
Yeah.
And you academics can figure out that quantum, you know. What does it mean is that we're the youngest continent on earth. In Europe, the average age in Europe, the average population age is between 40.4 and 47.4. And we know that China will end up with 1 billion people in the next 60 years because there will be depopulation. So these are stats that show you the comparative age. When it comes to South Africa, we're on the same barometer of between 18.8 to 21. That's our average age of below 65. So more than half of our population is what we are talking about. So is that an asset? The answer is yes, because we become an asset pool for the world. It's how you look at something, how you transform it. Second issue is that on the constitution of universities, how are they constructed on the management and the council? What percentage of business leaders are on those things? What percentage of industry captains are on those things? Or are we just academics? Because the starting point is to make sure that in that leadership team, you have the right mix of people that talk to each other to address the issues you are raising. We are far removed, even at our organizational level. I know there are various chairs at universities sponsored by companies. Anglo was sponsoring a lot of the mining chair adverts, for example, you know. And I know that CPUT at Cecil was doing some great work with you guys. I don't know how far it went, but so you know that industry has always been there. But look at the constitution of a university in terms of its administration or its executive authority or supervisory boards. You don't find many private sector players or industry captains there, or even leading scientists, you know, for that matter, or the alumni who are giving back. The third issue is that this thing about economy being bad, when does it become good? You take the fact that you've got an asset base, and you've got an institution of learning in all shapes and forms, and we have so many societal problems to fix. It's an opportunity. But we are waiting. My closing part is that, do we have an asset? The youth are a great asset. Are all institutions asset valued? Definitely. But what we are missing is a product.
Yeah.
I'm yet to see from a university a product that the market wants. Don't confuse the certificate. A product is a program. You know, I was saying to some international investor this morning, you only buy the ice cream you like. You don't buy the ice cream with the politics.
Yeah.
So if somebody makes a good ice cream, you go and buy it, you know. So we must also become attractive as universities. That's what I'm trying to say to you, that change the product line, you know.
Yeah. Can I just say there, I don't know if they want to intervene there, but I do think the universities have products. They just don't know how to sell the product.
Well,
Because are you telling me that in all these PhDs and master's theses, etc., there are no products?
certainly the university does have
There
the
are
products.
products. It's
So
just
I just
that
want to
even
say
the
this,
people who wrote the products
Yeah.
just wrote it and left and just went to do something else.
So just to answer one of Nathan's queries around the university's constitution. So the university does have a statute. And in the statute, it speaks about the composition of council.
Yeah.
And it certainly makes provision for representation from industry on council.
Yeah.
So that skill set is included in there. Earlier on, we also spoke about, universities need to lead in certain areas. And there are several accounts in this country where we saw leading academics from university that led. And a simple example is just COVID. So I do want to say that when one looks for solutions to societal problems, I believe it's found in academia and the universities.
No,
Thank you.
wonderful. No, absolutely. We're going to have to leave it there, but I think that we've managed to provoke some discussion. I want to see whether in the next, by the time we get to the next conference, I don't know where's Professor Duko here, whether or not something would have come out of this discussion, right, which will be an initiative from here, reaching out to government, reaching out to industry, even if it's a three-way dialogue of some kind that says, why don't we identify, right, one or two things that a particular institution can try and help solve? You're still asking a question now. You have a delayed reaction. You have 2 minutes. Okay, let's see.
No, another, the company of academics, you can calculate this.
Yeah.
So let's take CPUT as an example because it's the host, Maybe my challenge is that let this institution actually put an economic value to it. And maybe it's an exercise to say, what is our true economic value? Then from there you can unlock it. But I'm encouraging you that I would like to see universities, like how we value companies and industry and society, put an economic value. Because if you can't put a value to it, your product argument fails.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. I believe there's huge potential. All universities have huge potential. All they have to do is to go to the library and take as a sample, general sample of 5 PhDs. If they don't find stuff to use there, then it means they must fail those people. Because those people, gave us dreams. They said they're going to have new knowledge and whatever. They spent 5 years researching, interviewing people, doing, spending money also. But there's a subsidy of the state. The state has spent money on a PhD student, 5 years. Or maybe 4 years if you have done it on record time like you. I'm sure you've done it in record time like me. So I want to leave it on that note to say the universities have a wealth of, it's like our continent. Our continent is sitting with minerals and what, we don't beneficiate that. We take it as it is and we send it to Europe and then we pay for products that come from Europe that have been manufactured using our own resources. And we pay more and we feel good about paying for something that comes from Europe when the resources were dug from here and then exported. Same with universities. We're sitting with the knowledge, we're sitting with the products, we're sitting with all the research, the innovation. Now we must now take it and read the recipe somewhere to combine it to deliver something that will deal with the human need I spoke about earlier. But thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for your attention. MC, back to you.
Thank you so much. So we'll open the floor maybe for just 1 or 2 comments from the floor or questions. And I know that we've got academics on the floor, so we'll try and keep it straight to the point, nice and short. So any takers, Prof. Dako, if you could also check if we've got any comments or questions on the online platform. Any comments from the floor? So 1 or 2.
Thank you very much, program director. And quite a handful discussion. I just think that what interests me is particularly what I think Professor J.J. Tabane, I like to term it a national leadership identity crisis that we have. I think we have a problem that the reason why the efforts of the country and the different people aren't able to really achieve the intended objectives. You might have a national development plan, you might have institutions trying to do something, but I think that it's too different people, it's too many different people with their thinking, which goes back to your thought leadership. The thinking that we have is so diverse, and it's so, one, you get people that are basing their thinking from an ideological point of view, but there's no relationship between that particular ideological thinking that they have to what really is the need that we have as a country. So the theory and praxis issue is there. So that's why you get to a point where we want to do something. Universities have done so much. I mean, I'll make an example, for instance, and I'm not defending universities, neither am I saying government is perhaps not doing enough. But all I'm trying to say is that, you know, I'm coming from the startup space. We did something in the fintech space, a technology platform for Stockfells. And we go to Technology Innovation Agency. Technology Innovation Agency says to us, bring us a prototype. You bring them a prototype. The prototype is there. Now we need to go and develop the business case. I'm coming from university. The things that they ask for, the university has not necessarily prepared me to do that. But at the same time, if you look at what the university enhancement programs do in terms of entrepreneurship, you would be expecting that you would have a university that says, how do we get involved, or how does government make sure that the things that they cannot cover through that enterprise development, through the incubation programs that your technology innovation agencies do, are covered by universities, so that there is no gap? Because now you have a gap that you have this system, but you don't know how to justify the value it's going to bring because the university didn't teach you. And the reason why that problem is there, that the things that industry sometimes demand is not the same as what the university gave us, and vis-a-vis what government sometimes, parastatals demand, is because the people that are leading those initiatives are not people with the experience that is required. They themselves are making policies. Goes back to what Dr. Zwagala is saying. They are making policies, but they don't have the practical experience of what really is on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll take another comment or question.
It's just a comment. What I've seen is policy misalignment. First of all, if you check with varsities, we have our own internal policies, which we operate with, you know, on a regular basis. When we do research, when we teach, and so on. Now, some of the policies we have are not entrepreneurial enough, which is one question we need to go back and, you know, recheck. Also, when you go back and check with our stakeholders, let's talk about public sector, and take, for example, Department of Higher Education. There are a number of policies as well, which are sitting with Department of Higher Education, which we also need to implement internally. But we are sometimes restricted. We are sometimes restricted as academic to, you know, be entrepreneurial in terms of our approach because of the policy. So, which is one issue which might have been restricting some academics. The second point I wanted to talk about is the issue of the triple P, public part, what's a public-private partnership. Now, this debate, which Prof. JJ did mention, I feel we need to open it, for maybe like, what will I say, maybe a conference whereby we sit also with the public sector with the academics let us talk about it. Let us talk about the problems we are facing, and then let us see how we can navigate it forward. Because doing it alone as academics, later on, we are restricted because of policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Dako. Nothing, no comment online. That will be the very last comment.
Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, I'll comment on the PhD who have like completed and their thesis are like sitting in the library. So what I think is as you like get educated further and further, I believe the propensity to take risk reduces. So you start comparing. If I'm offered 50,000 a month, and then I've got this project which I said is going to work, and I start from scratch, will it work, or should I should I get employed? So at the end of the day, when you compare to use your thesis, what you suggested to say it's going to help, or to go and get employed, then getting employed sometimes becomes attractive. Then your thesis is seated there because no one will take your thesis and like use it. Like it's better to use your own thing which you started rather than someone getting to the library and say, "I'll try to use this." So that's one comment I will actually put forward. Even if maybe we were to look at entrepreneurs, you realize that the majority started like, pushed by a certain maybe, something, then they started at a younger age. PhDs, entrepreneurs, they are there, but in most of them, it's after retirement, when they now have the money. So that's my take on that. Why maybe most of the theses are just seated, maybe at a later stage when now they have the income, then they will now revisit that. And then also similarly to what he said, I think there's also a misalignment on what the industry is offering in comparison to what the universities are offering. The universities, there's a tendency to offer more of soft skills in comparison to practicals and all that. If we were to look back, our fathers, they were artisan schools and all that, whereby when you complete whether university, you actually can do you can work with your hands and all that. That seems to be reducing. There's more of soft skills offered in comparison to practicals. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, and this brings us to the end of the panel discussion with all those thought-provoking and very serious conversations and discussions that were had here. Panel members, thank you very much. We've now come to the end of another session, and we will break for lunch. And after lunch, we will go to the different tracks to continue with the presentations. Please do enjoy lunch. Thank you.